quick, I would like to get your breakdown of Adam, since you brought Adam Kownacki up. He's going to be taking on Robert Helenius. And on the undercard, then you have Charles Martin, former world champion, taking on Gerald Washington. Good heavyweight fights. What are your thoughts on the first one, the main event?
That's Kownacki's a pressure fighter, and Helenius has been in camp with us before, and Helenius, he had some injuries a few years ago and came back off those injuries, so he's getting back in the mix. Can he keep Kownacki off of him with his jab? If it really is a very easy fight to pick in terms of, if Helenius can use his length, and he's very, very long. If he can use his length and range, he can be successful. If he cannot, it'll be Kownacki. And Kownacki's a persistent guy, and Kownacki knows he has to get within range to be successful. He can't stay right out there at the end of Helenius's punches. And so it's going to be simply who's going to do what they do, who can impose their game plan.
And Charles Martin versus Gerald Washington, because Gerald Washington actually knocked out Robert Helenius.
Gerald looked to be, like he was sliding down. And then he pulled off a huge win over Helenius, which I don't think people thought he would do. He looked better than he's looked in a long time, so it's a little bit of a rejuvenated Gerald Washington. That being said, if you judge Charles Martin off the fight with Joshua, you're mistaken. He performed extremely well against Kownacki. He's a tough guy with a lot of skill and a lot of potential, and he's left-handed as well. That's a really interesting fight. I think that fight could be the fight of the night. It may take, give it 3. You may even hear boos for 2 to 3 rounds, but when it heats up, it's going to be fun, real quick.
If Washington could somehow beat Martin, can you see a world where he can beat a Dillian White? I have a listener from New Jersey that never stops calling in, always says, I want Washington to fight Dillian White. It's been at least, since the Rivas fight. I, like you, thought maybe Washington was sliding, and then he obviously got the big win with Robert Helenius. We'll see how much of Helenius. We interviewed Helenius. He said he was slightly injured. We'll see, when he fights Adam. But can Washington beat Dillian White in your opinion?
Well, the thing that we're one step away from asking that question. If he beats Charles Martin, then our whole perspective of that question changes. You see what I'm saying? If he beats Charles Martin, all of a sudden that's something we really need to talk about. Can he beat White? That
the way that you're saying is almost if you feel Martin should be the favorite.
I think Martin is the favorite. Okay. Yeah, I think Martin should be the favorite. He's been at a higher level, and but it's not a prohibitive favorite. It's a very good fight. I mean, it's an intriguing fight. And I think that's the whole thing is, there's that thing that when you see a movie preview that makes you go, ooh, I gotta see that. Mm-hmm. Well, this is that in a fight. This is that kind of fight that's like, oh, that one I need to see. That's going to be interesting. And so I'm looking forward to it. Gerald is a big guy, but I don't know that he thinks he's a big guy. Like, he doesn't fight like he thinks he's a big guy. He sometimes gives that, he sometimes gives the impression that he's not convinced he's as huge as he is. And you have a guy like Kownacki that just kind of comes in and makes you feel small. But this last fight with Helenius, he fought like he had formidable power and size, and I thought that's what, and heart, and that's what pulled him through. So if he continues that, this thing with Martin gets real interesting, and if he wins that fight with Martin, then you could realistically make a case for a fight with Dillian White.
Like, subscribe, and share. As always, if you want to support us to the next level, head over to the patreon.com/ThaBoxingVoice. We have tons of exclusive from Border Wars, Entitled, betting shows, the list goes on and on and on. But in addition to that, if you guys have questions for fighters, trainers, and promoters, this is where you can submit them. We will run out, get these questions answered, and put it back on the show just for you guys. Appreciate it. Peace.